My name is Lydia Bucklin, and I have been asked to speak to you a bit about finances through an abundance mindset. And I want to start by offering a prayer. Actually, it's more like a blessing, and it's by Kate Bowler. A blessing for loving what is instead of what could have been, by Kate Bowler. Blessed are you who are attempting to love what is here, what is now. You who recognize the wonder and pain looking at life's rearview mirror, at those things that are gone, the person you were, the quickness and sharpness of a body that didn't tire as quickly, the relationships and jobs and aspirations, the people you can't get back. Blessed are you holding the gentle compassion that wraps memories in grace. And blessed are you turning your gaze from imagined futures that seem to call out with an unnecessary pressure and an urgency that wants to rob you of what joys still exist. And oh, how blessed you are, drawing a tiny boundary around today and calling it home. For yesterday is a memory and tomorrow a mirage. Blessed are you, recognizing that the right sizing of reach and possibility is the heart's ease of God's good counsel, opening your eyes to all that is here. Let its beauty seep into your pores and whisper words of peace. Receive and welcome reality in its completeness, giving over to God all that is beyond your power to change or understand or return to once again. And in the meantime, embracing and loving the life you have, the family you have, the pleasures that are yours right now. Amen. As I said, my name is Lydia Bucklin, and I reside and work on the land of the Anishinaabe along the shores of Lake Superior. Here's a picture from right down the street from my house and my office. So here in Northern Michigan, I serve as the canon to the Ordinary for Discipleship and Vitality. And I also most recently started serving as the project director for the Mutual Ministry Initiative at Virginia Theological Seminary, which is a new Lilly Endowment funded initiative to train clergy and leaders in the areas of shared ministry. But more importantly, our work is to support models of baptismal ecclesiology lived faithfully in the church. So in regards to today's topic, I am not an expert on finances, but I have walked alongside congregations having to make some really hard decisions about their futures. And I also was part of a diocesan restructuring based on our own work, actually, at the Diocesan Leadership Initiative when we attended back in 2018. So it is a pleasure to continue learning alongside you. Full disclosure that I offer my stories humbly, not as a solution for your own challenges, but as a companion along the way. When thinking about financial matters, it is helpful to remind ourselves that God always provides all that we need. And I want to stress that God provides what we need, maybe not what we want. And maybe not what we think we need. What we need is what God is asking us to do in our particular communities. And that takes some real listening. So these passages are only a glimpse at the wisdom we have from the scriptures about God's abundance and generosity. From Philippians, my God will fully supply your every need according to his glorious riches in the Messiah Jesus. And from second letter to the Corinthians, and God is able to make all grace abound to you so that always having all sufficiency in everything, you may have an abundance for every good deed. And you could add to these passages with your own favorite passages, all about God providing for us. When considering abundance, I also always think of these stories from scripture about manna raining down from heaven, from the book of Exodus and the book of Numbers and in the Psalms. And if you'll recall, the Israelites are out wandering in the wilderness after the Exodus from over 400 years of captivity. And they're wondering where their next meal is going to come from. So on the long trek to the promised land, they start to complain about being rescued from the Egyptians only to die in the desert. And God rains down food, which the Israelites call manna. Manna, literally translating to, what is this? What is it? Even with the nourishment, even with all the manna raining from heaven, people were annoyed. In Numbers chapter 11, the people say, we miss the fish we ate in Egypt, and also the cucumbers and the melons and the leeks and onions and garlic. But now we have lost our appetite. We never see anything but this manna. Peter Drucker is a well-known management consultant who said, when it rains manna from heaven, most people reach for an umbrella, and some reach for a spoon. So I want to tell you a story of a congregation that reached for a spoon. So one more disclaimer. Please hear that I am not suggesting that the answer for Grace Episcopal Church in Ishpeming is the answer for any of your places of worship. But for the sake of shared learning, let's use it kind of as a case study, an example of one place that took a situation of despair in an attempt to create something new. Here are some facts about Grace Episcopal Church in Ishpeming. Ishpeming is about half an hour away from Marquette, Michigan, which is the largest city in the Upper Peninsula. And Grace Church Ishpeming has about 11 people average Sunday attendance. Their total membership is around 45, though maybe some of those folks are no longer living. They have $9,000 left in their trust. $11,000 comes in their pledge and plate. They have taken out over $30,000 in previous loans with the diocese that they've been unable to pay. And in their operating budget, they have indicated that it costs $70,000 to operate. Probably most importantly, I'd love to tell you that they are faithful, loving, wonderful people. So here is a photo from Grace in its glory days on the left, with the bell choir playing, the handbells, and you'll also see there weren't too many people in the pews back then. And the picture on the right is a photo of the community remaining worshiping in the parish hall when their heater went out. So Ishpeming. Ishpeming was once a wealthy mining town, with the owners of the mines investing heavily in the community and living in the community. It was actually the location for filming the movie Anatomy of a Murder. So there are stories around town of Jimmy Stewart and Duke Ellington hanging out in the speakeasy between filming times. Lots and lots of wonderful stories about how things used to be. And the photo on the right shows you the town now. The population is 6,400. They lost half their population over the past 100 years. 34% of students in elementary, middle, and high school report depression and suicidal thoughts. Deteriorating buildings are filled in the town. It's also a low food, healthy access zone. And there is a lot of recreation. So the Heritage Trail, Ramba trails, these are all bike trails. Mountain biking trails, off-road trails, and there's also a great deal of trails for cross-country skiing and some Olympic ski jumping training. There are also, in this town of 6,400 people, there are 15 churches within 3 miles. 3 of them are ELCA, and one other is the Episcopal Church. About 5 miles down the road, there's another Episcopal church in a small town called Nagani. And Nagani is where the mine workers lived. And so Nagani and Ishpeming do not play well together from that old history between the owners of the mines and the workers of the mines. Here's some photos of the buildings and the state that they are in right now in Ishpeming. Here's a picture of Grace Episcopal Church. So Grace is a shared ministry congregation. That's what we call our congregations in the Diocese of Northern Michigan, where they have ministry support teams, where the members of the community are called, informed, and commissioned to serve together. So they do have a history of working together around ministry. Just prior to COVID, their heat went out, and to replace the furnace would be another $35,000. The senior warden, who works in the mine himself, usually works week-long midnight shifts with just a few days in between, and he was exhausted. He said he was tired of shoveling snow, checking on pipes, collecting the mail, paying the bills, all these things we do in order to have church. So the congregation called me from the diocesan office to have a conversation about what they might do next. And we did two things. We read this amazing book, Claiming Resurrection in the Dying Church, Freedom Beyond Survival by Anna B. Olson, which I would highly recommend to you. And we asked this question: assuming God will bless you with all that you need to do the work God is calling you to do, what is your dream for this church? Assuming God will bless you, has blessed you with all that you need to do what God is calling you to do, what is your dream for this church? And they talked about their memories of the way things used to be, and the children they no longer had in the nursery, and the handbells that no longer rang. And then they started talking about what is. The fact that they are asked to host the funerals of the firefighters and the police officers, and that they run into people around town who remember having their weddings in the church or being baptized at Grace, but who haven't been back to worship because they work midnight shifts at the assisted living home, or their shift at Walmart is unpredictable and sometimes falls on a Sunday morning. And they wondered, this tiny community of Grace Episcopal Church wondered what they actually had to offer their beloved town of Ishpeming. With all of these other churches around them and less energy and few people to volunteer and to host any ideas they might come up with, what did they have to offer? And so I reminded them of the question, what is your dream for this church? And it turns out their dream wasn't to go backwards, but to go forwards. They wanted to open their space up for the community use, and they wanted to continue to be a sacred place for the people around them. But where were the people? Where were the people already gathering? When you drive through Ishpeming, it feels a bit like a ghost town. There are no community centers, no shopping malls, but people, we just know, always find a way toward one another. So where was it that people were gathering? When I asked this question, Bill, the tired senior warden, laughed and said, "Oh, they're right behind us at Cognition." And so we went to talk to the people. Cognition is a local brewery tucked away in a tiny speakeasy in the bottom level of this dilapidated historic building called the Mather Inn. And it happens to be in the alleyway literally behind Grace Episcopal Church. The owner of Cognition, Jay Clancy, is an electrician in his late 60s who just loves the town of Ishpeming, the people in the town, and beer. At Cognition, all ages were gathering, old-timers like Jay, but also musicians and BMX bikers and artists and young families who were moving into the town that had more affordable housing than Marquette. One of the bartenders, Jay told me, even started a Sunday night potluck with crock pots and shared dishes, and more than 40 people would come on Sundays to eat a meal together. And so we asked Jay about his dreams. And Jay's dream was to follow this movement happening across the UK called Pub is the Hub. And this idea is that the pub should be the center or the hub of community life, but also provide essential services beyond usual food, drinks, or entertainment. It's a not-for-profit organization in the UK that helps communities think more broadly about their services, asking them to partner with the community to match the additional needs of the community, to do things like adding a food bank or adding a place for students to study, to work together to match the needs of the community with the things that pub has to offer. It just so happened that Jay was in the midst of a messy legal dispute with his current landlord, and the location where Cognition has existed will no longer be available to him. So he dreamed about having a new space. And the things he wanted in the new space included things like a childcare spot for his brewer's 3-year-old to play, saying that childcare was often an issue and that actually many of his employees struggled to make their shifts balancing the needs of their families. So he'd love to offer a nursery or childcare for his employees and maybe even others. And as we got to know Jay, we got to hear more about his own faith story, about his long history with the Roman Catholic Church, the reasons he left, the ways he connects with God through the personal relationships he has with his friends and through creation out at his home on the lake. And as we started to dream together, we realized that we shared a lot of the same dreams. So we asked a hard question. Would we be willing to trust Jay and his team at Cognition with this sacred building, with the intention that we would be partners moving forward? And that's what the vestry and the entire congregation decided to do. So Jay was sold the building for $100, covenanting with the community of grace that they may use the space for worship each Sunday morning for no cost. And the crazy spirit-led thing that happened is that every time we gathered to dream with Jay, Jay brought along his friends. And all of a sudden, we had this community partnership beyond what we ever could have imagined. Feeding America West Michigan said, we got this grant from Whirlpool for refrigerated units to place in food pantry locations. Maybe we could put one in the new space and people could bring items to leave and take items they need as they come into the pub. A local florist named Shayla asked if she might offer workshops on wreath making and floral arrangements. One of the managers of Cognition had just purchased a food truck with her partner to smoke meat in, and in exchange for using the church kitchen, they offered to host a monthly cookout called Holy Smokes, where all of their proceeds once a month would go to ministry. And Lori, a local pie maker who owns Peace Pie Company, asked if she might host a monthly poetry reading night called Peace Pies and Poetry, with the proceeds going to social justice. And another community partner, Partridge Creek Farm, asked if they might be involved as well. Their goal is to reduce food insecurity, supporting food-based economic development, and providing education to the next generation on sustainable food systems through hands-on farming. So they asked if we could think creatively about redeveloping the land around the church into a community garden where the food that is grown might also be the food that feeds the community. We asked the question, what does Grace Episcopal Church gain? And it turns out it was a lot. A well-maintained, updated building to use free of charge, new members as energy builds and people learn more about them through the excitement, as we've already seen happen, actually, with people wondering, what is the Episcopal Church? And, oh, that sounds like a good fit for me. Also, revitalization in Ishpeming with the creation of this new community center. People in their beloved building every day, which, as you'll remember, was their dream. Opportunities for shared ministry and outreach in feeding, winter clothing drives with the Animal Rescue League called UPAWS, and inspiration for other communities of faith to take a risk. After we did all of the proper discussions and decisions, and the Diocesan Trust and Standing Committee and Diocesan Council voted to affirm the sale of Grace's building, we knew that we needed to share our story honestly and authentically, because otherwise the narrative could easily be church goes bankrupt, sells building to bar. But that isn't our story. And in fact, when we met up at the church to take a photo to share, all of the partners came out as well, including the mayor of Ishpeming, who you see here in the bottom row on the left. She came out to offer her excitement and support. The local news who covered the story was so excited that when I was at another diocesan event covered by that same reporter, he asked me how it was going with the brewery, because they've been talking about it so much at the newsroom, about how excited they are not just to keep covering the story as it unfolds, but to come visit themselves.